Welcome back to Offsides, VUTV10's only professional sports talk show. I'm Monet Oda.
And I'm Bobby Serafin. Today our host Seth Helman and I will recap the men's and women's March Madness tournaments.
Then Seth and Tyler Carroll will break down the highlights and lowlights of Tyler's bracket.
And finally, analyst Alexa Podalsky will talk the Celtics and their renewed championship hopes.
All this and more, Offside starts right now.
Welcome to this Offsides NCAA March Madness recap. I'm Seth Helman. I'm joined today by Bobby Serafin. Bobby, let's get started with the women's champion. What went right for the Cox this year?
Well, South Carolina, they were riding off a very impressive regular season. In their first game, they held Howard University to the lowest points ever in a March Madness tournament. Tournament MVP and first-round pick of the WNBA draft, Aaliyah Boston, was their main force, but it was really Destiny that got them to this point, as Destiny Henderson scored 26 for the Gamecocks in the tournament championship game against UConn.
And let's go over to the men's side now. What went right for Kansas this year? How did they get to where they were and finally win that championship?
Well, Kansas was on a mission after not being able to compete in the 2020 tournament due to COVID. They had a lot of pieces come together, led by Okai Agbaji, who was their star throughout the whole tournament, but really it was their depth that was their difference maker for them. One of the best teams in transition, and rightfully so, the winners of the men's March Madness.
Now, Kansas is under investigation. They might be seeing some sanctions. Do you think that they should get their title stripped or that they should keep it?
I mean, if you look at baseball, the Astros technically haven't gotten their title stripped, so I think the Jayhawks more than likely will end up keeping their title, but obviously they're in a little bit of hot water right now.
Fair enough. I personally think that, it depends on what the issue is. If it's a recruiting issue and they got guys illegally.
Like they had that whole issue at LSU. There's a lot of hot water there that got their head coach fired, and they were able to replace him, but that's just a lot of bad blood for the program.
Yeah, if you got players and you weren't supposed to get those players, then I think that there's a legitimate argument to pull that title, but the way they played, they certainly earned it. Let's move on now to the other side of things, to a team that had success, but no one was expecting it. What was your biggest Cinderella story of the two tournaments?
Well, I mean, I think to put it one way or the other, the whole thing came down to the St. Peter's Peacocks, the first ever 15 seed to advance to the Elite Eight. I mean, these guys really put the entire nation's hearts on their backs, and they were just, a really good surprise. They had only 2 players on their team that averaged over double figures on the season, and I mean, their mascot's the Peacocks, so how can you not love them?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't expect them to win against Kentucky in the first round, let alone win as many games as they ended up doing. That one really busted my bracket. Moving on to one of the more fun games that we had, probably the most watched and most anticipated game of the tournament. UNC ends Coach K's career and beats Duke. What are your thoughts about that game?
I mean, it was the 257th time these teams had met in their history, and for Duke to have Coach K's career come to a close at the hands of the Tar Heels, it's really just quite the narrative, because the same thing happened in the regular season. Cameron Indoor Stadium, the last home game for Coach K, Tar Heels also busted that party. So for now to be on the big stage and have Coach K go out with a whimper, it's a really sad thing for the greatest coach to ever grace the college basketball landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't think that Coach K was going to end up getting a championship in his last year. It's just so rare for that to happen. What was really telling to me was how Duke acted after that game. I think only 1 or 2 of his guys went with him in the handshake
just him
line.
and Wendell Moore as the rest of the team, which, I mean, for the most part, were freshmen, so they're not really accustomed to this type of scenario. They all headed to the locker room before the game was even over. So, from a program that has so many good character guys who have made it in the NBA, it would have been like to see them with a little bit more grace finish out their coach's historic career.
Yeah, certainly a disappointing finish for Coach K and a disappointing display by his players. Now, let's move on to another set of teams that didn't perform the way that they might have liked to. both the men's and women's Iowa teams with disappointing tournament appearances. What went wrong there, and what do you see as something that they need to do in the future?
I mean, both teams came into this tournament with very high-profile players. The men's with Keegan Murray, who is a projected top 10 pick in the NBA draft, and the runner-up in the women's side for Player of the Year in Caitlin Clark, who set records this year and had over 11 games of 30-plus points. The thing about these two, though, is Iowa came off a little bit of a high. They won the Big Ten postseason tournament on the men's side, and that was just their high point, and they weren't able to get it together against a Richmond team that came in very fundamentally sound and just kind of stole the show from them a little bit. But on the women's side, really coming out of the gate slow and crashing out in the second round against a Creighton team that was one of the big surprises in the women's side.
Yeah, certainly a disappointment for Iowa fans, and that comes on the heels of last year's tournament appearance when they were led by Luka Garza, and their fans really thought that they had a shot, and that one ended early as well. And one last point here, who did you think was the best individual player in both of the tournaments?
I mean, he led his team all the way to the national championship on the men's side. I'm going to have to go with Armando Bacot, who averaged 16 and 16 throughout the tournament while also playing on an injured ankle. I mean, the man went through it all and was still able to put together amazing performances in both the semifinal and the final game. Although North Carolina weren't able to get it done without Armando Bacot, it would have been nowhere near that final.
Yeah, he was unbelievable all tournament long, and that's all we have for today's March Madness recap. Thank you for joining us. Now I'm going to stick with Ty in just a moment to talk about his bracket. Well, as promised, we're here for a bracket breakdown with Tyler Carroll. Tyler, we're going to go round by round here, pick some of the games that you picked, some of the good ones, some of the questionable ones, some of the ones that I myself picked as well. We're going to start in the round of 64 with a pick that I actually agreed with you on. What made you take Richmond to win?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Seth. I had a pretty good bracket this year. I'm excited to talk about it. I picked the Spiders to win in the first round. I always like to throw in a few upsets. You know, those 12 and 13 seeds, sometimes they can sneak by. Richmond was riding a 4-game win streak into the tournament and relied heavily on senior guard Jacob Gilyard during those games. When he plays well, Richmond wins. That was the story all season, and it was especially the story in the first round. Gilyard carried the team against Iowa with 24 of his team's 67 points to upset the Hawkeyes. Also, I lived near Richmond for a few years a while back and went to some Spiders games, so call a homer's luck if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a great pick. I always like to pick a couple of 12s to beat 5 seeds. Seems like every single tournament you see one of those. And another kind of Nostradamus-like pick that you had Gonzaga losing very early in the tournament. Why did you think that they were going to lose in the Sweet 16?
Yes, Seth, Gonzaga didn't impress me this year. I mean, yeah, they were 13-1 in their conference, and yes, they were undefeated at home. They're Gonzaga, so you know they're good to win a few rounds every year, but they were only 4-3 against ranked opponents this year. When you play easy competition all season long, it's hard to go the distance with other true competitors. We see it year after year. Now, I wasn't sure if it would be UConn or Arkansas that did them in, but I was betting against the Bulldogs this year.
Yeah, I mean, it was clearly a really good pick by you. I didn't think that they were going to win the tournament necessarily, but I certainly didn't have them out that early. Now, moving on to a team that I picked to win the tournament, what went wrong with Arizona? Why did they lose so early?
I have no idea. What we're talking about here is a team that won the Pac-12 championship, got the school's first #1 seed since 2014, and all with a rookie coach. When you talk about telling a story, Arizona seemed like a great protagonist this year. I was worried when they only beat TCU by 5, but the wheels really fell off in the Sweet 16 against Houston. They didn't hold the lead at all, once. Not at all the entire game. This year, Arizona reminded a lot of people that any amount of planning or bracketology will always fall short to the chaos of real life.
Yeah, I mean, that loss certainly really busted my bracket. I had a couple losses early on, but nothing was bigger than Arizona. Now, speaking of busted brackets, what made you think that Texas was going to end up in the Final Four?
Yeah, you know, I've been dreading when I have to explain this decision. I picked Texas to go to the Final Four because I liked the way they played all year. I thought they had the best shot of representing the East, and the loss to Purdue made me a little bit emotional. The Longhorns only lost by 10 in the Sweet 16 to Purdue, which sounds bad, I know, but it wasn't because they were the less skilled team. The Longhorns' lack of discipline is what led them to losing this one. At the free throw line, they lost 33-7. Now, that's just not a recipe you can win games with. For a team with 4 seniors and 1 junior on their starting 5, I didn't think they would be that undisciplined, but it is what happens when you don't keep things in check against a well-disciplined team like the Boilermakers.
You know, I've done this before on this show, and I love that I get an opportunity to do it again. Horns down, baby. Horns down. You gotta love it. Now, moving on to the biggest pick. Honestly, in my book, nobody can be perfect on the bracket, but if you pick the champion right, you got to feel pretty good about yourself. You picked them right. You took Kansas. Why? What was your thought process heading into the tournament?
Well, you know, Seth, you're right. I do feel pretty good about this pick. Kansas hadn't won since 2008, but I thought they had the most momentum of all the number 1 seeds coming into the tournament. They won their last 5 games of the season, 4 of which were against other tournament teams. The Jayhawks have been winning at a high level all year, so why wouldn't they continue to? Led by Ochai Agbaji, the guard projected to go in the first round of the NBA draft this spring, Kansas had talent all over the court and predictably didn't face much trouble on their way to a thrilling 72-69 victory over UNC in the finals. Overall, I was shocked at how well my bracket turned out this season. I did a fair amount of research before finalizing my picks, but as you can tell, a lot of them are based around gut feelings and personal biases too. I can't wait to win again next year and sit here right back at this desk and have you analyze my picks again.
Well, my hope is certainly that we can flip the roles next year and I'll be defending my bracket and you can sit here and try to roast it, but that is all the time we have for Tyler's bracket roast. Alexa, tell us about the Celtics.
Thanks, Seth. It has been quite the season for the Boston Celtics. They started off with a 23-24 record and looked like they would be in the Eastern Conference play-in as the 10th seed. It seemed like all hope was lost for the team until January 29th rolled around. Since then, they've had multiple winning streaks, boosted their record to 53-31, and have clinched the 2nd seed in the conference. The question is, what changed? Well, the Celtics have transformed their defense since the beginning of 2022. They now rank 1st in defensive rating, opponents' field goal percentage, and opponents' points per game, passing the Golden State Warriors as the best defense this season. As good as the defense is, the success of the team relies on all-star small forward Jason Tatum. Since the beginning of March, Tatum has been a model of consistency. He scored 54 points against the Brooklyn Nets and 44 points against the Charlotte Hornets. In his last 10 games of the regular season, Tatum averaged 28.1 points per game. And with this momentum, the Celtics truly seem to have a shot at an NBA title. The Celtics' main issue is their star center, Robert Williams, who tore his meniscus in his left knee. He underwent surgery on March 30th and is expected to return in 4 to 6 weeks. No one really knows how the absence of Williams will affect the team, especially going into the playoffs, but the Celtics seem to be putting up a fight. In their game against the Raptors on March 28th, Williams, Tatum, and Jaylen Brown were all out on injuries, yet the Celtics still managed to bring the game into overtime and only lost by 3. This was followed by an 8-point loss to the number 1 seed Heat and a 5-point win against the Pacers. The Celtics seem to be handling the absence of Williams well, but only time will tell if they'll continue to perform or if they'll fall short. Monet and Bobby, back to you.
Thanks, Alexa. That's all we have for this episode of Offsides. If you're interested in joining our team, please email us at offsides@butv10.com.
Also, be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Offsides10.
On behalf of our entire cast and crew, thanks for watching and have a great night.